Welcome to another episode of Preparing for the Unexpected. I'm your host, Alex Fullick, and as always, we like to talk about things related to disaster recovery, business continuity, resilience, COVID, anything that helps you, your organization, or your community prepare for, respond to, and overcome adverse situations. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, please feel free. You can find me on LinkedIn. I am the only Alex Fullick there. I'm really easy to find, and I do respond to everything I get. It is that time again. Actually, it's been a while since our last
I
talk.
know.
And welcome back, Regina Phelps.
Alex, it is such a pleasure to be with you as always. Did we skip a month or two? I can't remember.
Just 1 month.
Seems like forever, doesn't it?
Schedules couldn't hook up. Yeah, it does feel like forever. Especially after, I think this is our 37th or 38th time that we've recorded an episode. So, and that doesn't include meeting at live broadcasts or anything either. So
what can I say? We're two peas in a pod.
Yeah. So we have some interesting topics to talk about today too.
We do. And it's not COVID.
No.
Although the COVID emergency has ended in the United States. Have you officially ended your COVID emergency in Canada? I think you have, haven't you?
I believe so, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And nice not to talk about.
To be honest, nobody was tracking anything anyway, at this point.
Right.
Everyone knows what to do when they've got the sniffles. They just stay home. Nobody's recording anything. No one's going for shots anymore. There aren't any centers to go to get checked out. Nothing. So, people are just treating as though it's a seasonal flu. I'm not feeling well. Staying home. There we go.
Right. It has really changed, and of course things do move on, right? And I totally understand that. But the thing that I think is disconcerting just a tiny bit is that there's still a lot of illness that's going on, at least here in the United States. And again, as you said many times, for most people, it's mostly the sniffles, although we still have 1,000 people dying a week in the US. That's not small change. Yeah. So 4,000 people a month are dying that wouldn't have died otherwise. But I think the thing that's just interesting both as somebody who's done pandemic planning for so many years, but also somebody in our field is that when you stop and think about it, is that no one's following what's going on. No one's really tracking variants or subvariants. So what I always think about in the back of my mind is, oh my God, could we end up being in the same place we were a few years ago next month or next year or 2 years from now, because nobody's paying any attention again. Yeah. So that gnaws at me a little bit. But yes, we're definitely back to business as usual here in the United States. And really, I think around the world.
Yeah. Everything is open. Travel, I don't know of any mask mandates, though there are some recommendations with hospitals and old age homes and other places like that. But other than that, that's it.
Yep, same here in the States. So we're going to talk about something different.
Okay, what's it going to be?
Today we're going to talk about polycrises.
Doesn't that fix your teeth?
That's a good one. I like that. Well, I'm going to show a deck of slides, and what I'd like to do today is I'd like us to talk a little bit about this. I really want to focus on geopolitical issues, and not Ukraine and Russia, but some other large geopolitical issue that's burgeoning, and talk a little bit about that. So I'd like to sort of go back and forth related to that particular topic and see how we land. So how's that sound for you?
Sounds good.
Great. Well, let's dig in here. Let me show my slides as usual. Oops. Yeah, I find this concept of polycrisis really interesting. Okay, like you might say, oh God, Regina, where did you get this idea? Well, I didn't make it up, although it's a pretty catchy title. It was actually created by a French guy, a French philosopher, actually. And he coined this term in the 1990s. Yeah, but it got a whole new life this year, early on in the year, in January at Davos. Now, I'm not a Davos devotee, and I don't follow the World Economic Forum closely, but this was the thing that really the media seemed to catch worldwide this year from Davos. And this was because a particular economic historian, Adam Tooze, what a last name, right? Tooze. He's the guy that basically started talking about this, and it got people super excited because it really describes the world we happen to be living in right now. And it basically is where you've got present crises like the COVID-19 pandemic, like the Ukraine war, like some other geopolitical issues, things such as the economic situation in many parts of the world, etc. Those have a tendency to potentially interact with future risks that are just slightly ahead of us. And what they can do is these simultaneous and overlapping crises can create a much bigger issue. And it actually makes a lot of sense when you sort of peel it back. And because I think it's something that is, I mean, there is so much going on around the world right now. I don't know if some days I just feel like, oh my God, between both economic related issues, all the geopolitical things, the health related things, just the general shift in governments across the world, there is a lot happening. And it makes me kind of a little bit on edge. And yet I've been practicing this work for 41 years, but it's never, ever been quite like this. It's pretty remarkable.
True.
Do you feel that way too?
I do. I think I said in an episode quite a long time ago that sometimes I think the Mayans had it right. They said there would be significant change after 2012 that would impact the world. And I think everybody interpreted that to be it would happen on a certain date within 2012, but it's actually there would be change, a new change coming after 2012. Well, ever since then, we have had all kinds of things, and it just seems to be like snow plowing. It's getting bigger and bigger.
I'd forgotten about the Mayan prediction. And yeah, that's actually really true. I think 2012 was certainly a line in the sand, and we certainly started to see that in politics, but also in geopolitical related issues, and certainly in rise and falls of governments around the world. It's been, I mean, the last 10 years have been, I think, brutal, actually. Right? And so this theme actually, I think, is really important. And I think in our world, the kind of work that we do, we have to really be aware of this, because I think especially as times are tough economically in many parts of the world, I don't know about Canada. Are you having layoffs and business closures in Canada right now?
Definitely layoffs when it comes to the large tech companies, because they've been laying off, large percentages of their workforces, and that impacts us up here. I'm not so much sure about small businesses, but I definitely know the large corporations are cutting back on things and laying people off or trying to get them to retire early. But there's a lot of pushback from those that want to retire early because they lost a lot of money because of the pandemic.
Right.
And some of the other economic circumstances that are around, they don't have the money to retire now.
Right. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Here in the States, and certainly my European clients, there's a lot of layoffs really across all industries. It seems to be affecting almost everybody. And there's a lot of uncertainty as the interest rates have continued to climb and trying to deal with inflation. That's kind of destabilized a variety of economic issues. It certainly has made the housing market much tighter here in the United States and in Europe. I'm assuming the same for you guys. Has your rates been going up as well? I haven't followed the Bank of Canada as closely.
Yeah, it's basically the same. They've been going up. I think they stopped. They were going to raise it, but they didn't, I believe, the last round.
Yeah.
But everyone's expecting it. If things continue the way it is, then they probably will.
Right. And so I think as money has gotten tighter, the housing market is constricted. The stock market's very edgy. We've had some bank failures here in the United States. I mean, that's pretty typical because we have a lot of banks. And so it's not uncommon that a smaller bank would fail like once a month, maybe out of thousands of banks. But we've had four very high profile banks that have failed in the last 60 days. And so I think people are just generally on edge and fairly anxious. And so I think you sort of tie all those things together, plus what's going on geopolitically, et cetera, it makes for the opportunity for polycrisis. And I've done a fair amount of talking about value and issues related to really improve how our industry needs to really focus on value. Because for example, I've had a lot of my clients who have had layoffs in their business continuity departments in the last 90 days. And they said, no, it's never going to happen. It's like, yeah, right. Business continuity is a line on an expense sheet. And if you can't prove that you have value, then it's going to be very tough to keep your department intact. And so this is sort of something I want people to be thinking about under this issue of polycrisis, because we have a lot to contribute, and we can use it as part of our arsenal about why our work is so important.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when the World Economic Forum, and actually and I'll send you the report, and you could put it on your site, your YouTube site. When they issued their risk analysis, which they do every year, this one was really good and kind of scary. And what I want you to do is, if you kind of take a moment, let me get my glasses so I can clearly see these smaller print. What they did is they surveyed all of the individuals which are risk managers around the world, and executives, and they're asking questions related to how they feel about the short term versus the long term as far as the overall outlook for the world. And there's some very scary kind of stats in here, because if you look at the darker orange, for example, and the notice is like, what do you feel over the next 2 years, short term, and then what do you feel over the long term? And 13% of those surveyed in this particular executive and risk manager survey said that they thought 13% of them said that progressive tipping points and persistent crises were likely to lead to catastrophic global outcomes. 13%, that's way higher than it's ever been. And that's pretty significant. And then the 10-year, 20% of them felt that we were at this progressive tipping point. So between 2 and 10 years, to up to 20% of the people surveyed felt that things weren't going so well, and we would actually have the possibility of having persistent and catastrophic outcomes, that's a little unnerving.
Yeah.
Now, the other one, which is also not so great news either, is that the big brown part that you see under the 2-year section was a 69% said that they thought things would remain consistently volatile across economies, across industries, across countries, and there would be multiple shocks that would cause a divergent trajectory, so that we'd be going in multiple different directions. 69% said that was likely in the next 2 years. And then 34% thought that was in 10 years. And if you go all the way over to the end of the chart, there's not too many optimistic people. And that's the yellow section, where in 2 years, 2% said that there would be renewed stability with a revival of global resilience, and 9% said that would happen in 10 years. But as you can see, the vast majority of people are not feeling very warm and fuzzy, certainly about the next 2 years, but even well into the 10 years.
Yeah, that's incredible numbers. Between the 2 years, 80 to 90% of people don't see things in a good light.
Right. I mean, to me, that was shocking. And we're talking about executives that lead your companies. We're talking about risk managers who are your risk managers in your organizations or organizations that your company works with. That's pretty significant. And these are people that have a broad vision about what's going on around the world, very well attuned to global related issues, and not very positive. What that says for us in our industry is that we really need to think about and maintain a really global outlook. And what I find in our industry is a lot of our colleagues, they're super busy in their own jobs and their own environments, and they're following things maybe within their industry, but they're not taking a more broader perspective. And what I'm really encouraging people in our industry is to sort of step back and look at some of these reports, look at some of these things, because they are forecasting things that we should be paying attention to, and that we can also educate people within our company by moving these kind of documents forward, also thinking about them with exercises that we might design, et cetera. And I'll talk more about that in a bit, but I think we have to expand our vision, because when you look at that large number of individuals who see a progressive tipping point towards persistent crises that are going to lead to catastrophic outcomes, that should make us all think, wow, okay, that's awful. And what can I be doing as a continuity crisis management professional to be able to meet these challenges? Because if I can position my knowledge, my skills, my abilities, I'm going to be able to help my current employer and perhaps other employers along the line, because I have broadened my view. Does that make sense?
It does, and you would think that organizations would be having that wider, or at least people in our industry would have that wider view, because for years we've been talking about supply chain management.
Right.
Which, if we don't have this wider view, that means we haven't been looking at supply chain management in a fully comprehensive view. We're just looking at how a product or service gets to us,
Right.
not what could be causing that product or service to not get to us, which could be all of the, these other things, geopolitical aspects and things that are happening around the world. I think so it's kind of surprising that we're only looking at one piece of that, not the whole picture.
Right. And I think many times those people I work with will say, well, Regina, that's not my ultimate job. I'm not the risk manager. And I'll say, yes, I understand that. But the greatest, you can provide more value to your organization. You can prove your value on a daily basis by literally being aware of these types of issues, so that when you're actually engaging with executives, you're engaging with other departments across the enterprise, you can actually be asking about some of these questions. You can find out who's monitoring these things in the organization, because sometimes people get their heads down in their jobs and they may not be even thinking about this.
Yeah.
And I think we can prove more value for ourselves, but we can also really make a great contribution by broadening our vision more widely. And so I will make sure that I'll make a note, and I'll send you this report so that you can actually post it and people can read it, because it's really thoughtful. And this, I think, gives you an idea of the level of concern that people are feeling around the world. And it's not just us in the US. This is a worldwide survey.
Yeah.
And this particular survey really looked at 5 big areas, but what it really boiled down to 3 really significant ones. One was that these risks are being fueled by economic related issues in the world, geopolitical issues in the world, and societal issues in the world. And I want to say that overarchingly, all of these things tie back to the pandemic as well. And one of our last conversations, we talked about the sort of long-term issues of the pandemic, of which all 3 of these certainly are fueled by. So the pandemic, many of these things have been boiling for a long time, but the pandemic really was the light of the match that basically ignited many of these issues, certainly economically, geopolitically, and societally. And so I think it's important for us to be aware of these, and I want to peel some of these back, and we can talk a little bit about each one of them in turn, because I think they're important for us to be aware of. So what the key thing about these is what they're doing, and this is why it's such a big deal for us, is it's really causing destabilization. And you're certainly seeing that both in supply chain management, but you're also seeing with migration of populations around the world. We see that at our southern border. You're seeing it at your border with people that are actually have somehow got through the US and ended up in Canada, where there's a lot of destabilization. You're seeing that with certainly countries in Europe, with the destabilization of many countries in Africa, Ukraine, and other places where there's this movement of people, and this migration is causing a lot of destabilization and risk. And so that's contributing to all of these kinds of things as we go through this.
It is interesting. Throughout history, they've said that there have been some mass migrations, and that we're in one now.
Oh my gosh. Because
it's not just one area of the world that's doing it, but it's happening everywhere.
Right. And it makes, of course, perfect sense, because for example, if you're in Africa and you're a fisherman and you're in South Africa and all the fish in your area have just been fished up by gigantic trawlers off the coast, then you're going to move because you can't feed your family. And they migrate north, or they migrate around the other side of the tip of the continent. And that migration is because of food, or it could be because of climate change and this change in the water, and et cetera, et cetera. So all of that begins, and then you have people moving, which then destabilizes the countries they move into, and so on and so on. So, this is all interestingly connected. I think we should maybe take a break and then we'll continue on. How's that?
Yeah, that sounds good. We're talking with Regina Phelps today, and we will be right back. If you like that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.